This is your friendly neighborhood author, Jonathan, and you are listening to Season 5 of the Floor Rejects podcast, The Isle of Artemisia. Hi there. Welcome back to the Floor Rejects podcast. If you missed last week, what you missed was a loss. We lost a couple of characters. We kind of saw the results of losing Nick, and we also saw Crystal disappear at the end of the chapter. Not a lot happened in between. We had some tension between Daniel and Barrett. Barrett having some suspicion of Daniel of maybe doing something to Nick to make him disappear because of his flirtation with Crystal. We saw Crystal get annoyed with everyone around her, and at the end of the chapter we saw her hypnotized in the same sort of way that Nick was and disappear over the side of the boat, just the same as we assume happened to Nick, but we don't know for sure. So with all that said, let's move on to Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Man Down. Wake up, Barrett hears. He moans, his head feeling as if it was full of buzzing bees. He opens his eyes and suddenly his throat burns and his eyes water, and he scrambles towards the edge of the boat, vomiting over the side loudly. Dude, seriously? He hears behind him. He turns to find Daniel standing over him, his arms crossed and his face pinched. Sorry, Barrett apologizes, climbing up to his knees and taking Daniel's hand to steady himself as he climbs to his feet. Where is she? Daniel asks. Crystal? Barrett replies, confused. He didn't know. No shit. Where is she? She's not in the water, she's not on deck, she's not in the cabin, but here you are. So where is she? He asks again. I don't know, I just woke up. The last time I saw her was, we were on the roof. I think I fell, Barrett says, the memory of the impact coming back to his mind as he reaches, feeling the sore knot on his head. You did, and we put you in the cabin, so what are you doing out here? Daniel reasons, and Barrett can't come up with a good explanation. He wasn't really sure what he was doing out on deck. I don't know, man. I really don't, Barrett admits. Daniel scoffs, yelling up into the sky and picking up a half-empty bottle of tequila from deck, taking a big swig from it. Nick is gone, Crystal's gone, and I find you out here. So where are they, Bear? Daniel asks. And Barrett doesn't know, but the accusation riles anger in the pit of his empty stomach. He was flirting with your girlfriend, Daniel, and she seemed like she liked it, Barrett counters, and Daniel scoffs. Are you kidding me, Barrett? He was harmless, and I trust Chris. I know I haven't done anything, so that only leaves you, Daniel reasons, and Barrett steps back, crossing his arms. And I know I didn't do anything, so that only leaves you, Barrett says, and Daniel, in a bout of frustration and anger, storms off to the back of the boat, grunting and cursing as he hoists the sail up from the mast. Well, then they must be back on shore, so we better get back, Daniel spits. The boat lurches for a moment as the wind catches the sail, but the boat quickly stills and the wind dies. Seriously? Daniel mutters, flopping down on the floor. Danny, I didn't do it, man. I swear, you know me, Barrett says, and Daniel looks up at him with a confused expression. So where are they? He asks, and Barrett shakes his head. He was just as concerned and confused as his friend was. We just got to make it back to shore. I'm sure they're there waiting for us or something. Something that makes sense, Barrett comforts, sliding down next to his friend. He lets his mind wander, praying that the wind would catch the sail and bring them back to the village. That never happens, and they sit in uncomfortable silence for a long time, both of them hoping for the same thing, both of them suspecting the other of something. Neither was sure exactly what they thought happened, but each had their reasons. It didn't look great that Nick had been flirting with Crystal right in front of Daniel, but Barrett's mysterious appearance on deck that morning didn't do him any favors either. Finally, Daniel speaks. I'm going to get the engine going, he says, standing with a loud grumble from his stomach and hunches over the engine. Barrett is quickly annoyed by all the sounds coming from the spluttering engine and goes back into the cabin. He lays in Nick's bed and falls asleep, his hunger driving him to a dreamless sleep. When he wakes up, Daniel is standing on the opposite side of the cabin in dim light. Any luck? He asks the glowering man, and Daniel shakes his head. Want me to give it a go? Barrett asks, and Daniel laughs. Engine's flooded. I have to fix it when there's more light, he says. So that means another night, Barrett asks, and Daniel nods, slipping down the wall as Barrett steps out into the dying light of dusk. He breathes in deep, waiting to hear a boat idle up or hear Crystal's voice or Nick's deep, accented laugh, but he hears nothing. He doesn't bother going back into the cabin. Daniel was obviously pissed and upset with him, and he couldn't really blame him. He'd basically accused him of doing something to Nick, and now Crystal was gone, and they were stuck out in the ocean. He was beginning to spiral, craving the feeling of his couch against his back, the sound of his TV drifting through his ears as he falls asleep in front of it. He paces the deck, his head pounding from his fall, still, and wonders what was happening around him. 2 people missing. No way home. He continues his mindless wandering on deck until a thought hits him. He dashes back into the cabin, rustling through his bag until he comes up with what he knew was in there. The compass. He couldn't believe he hadn't thought of it earlier. He shakes Daniel awake and the man opens his eyes for a smile for a split second before reality comes crashing back down. What? He asks. I have a compass, Barrett says excitedly. Daniel leans forward, looking at him with consternation. Why didn't you say anything before? Daniel asks, throwing his hands in the air. In all the confusion, I forgot, so let's use it to get back, Barrett says. And for the first time since he woke up that morning, he feels as though his friend is back on his side, while the pair of them rush out of the cramped, damp room up onto deck. So, which direction? Daniel asks, and Barrett's excitement comes crashing down. I don't know. Don't you have a map or something? The taller man asks, his eyes narrowing as he sees the fault in his discovery. No, I only brought the compass. I didn't think there would be an actual need for it. Or a map, Barrett's voice raises. Great, Daniel says, clapping his hands, and he laughs and leans over the railing. I'm sorry, Danny, I just thought that... Barrett tries to explain, but Daniel cuts him off. Thought that I threw Nick off his own boat? Did something to Crystal? Seriously, Bear? Daniel asks. Daniel, I didn't think any of that. I'm just scared. I don't know where they are. Barrett's voice gets even higher. He's on the verge of tears. What? You think I'm not? I have no idea where they are. I don't know how they could just disappear. It's not like they jumped overboard in the middle of the night, Daniel reasons, and Barrett has a flash of an idea, of a moment from his dreams. Dan, what if they were taken? Barrett says quietly, and Daniel scoffs. No one took them, Barrett. You're delusional. We're all alone in the middle of nowhere. Jesus Christ, I'm going to get some sleep and getting us out of here in the morning. I suggest you do the same, he says, and he stomps back into the cabin, locking the door behind him. Really? Barrett mutters to himself, sinking down to the deck, wishing to be back in his apartment, laying on his couch while a show plays mindlessly in the background. But he isn't in his apartment. Instead, he's lying on deck, floating in the middle of an unknown sea, missing half of his party and completely at a loss. It grows quickly dark, and when Barrett hears the door quietly unlock, he doesn't move. In fact, he crosses his arms and settles in. He would much rather be inside, but not while Daniel was awake. He watched light from the cabin disappear from under the door, and then a while later he could hear the quiet snores echoing out. He creeps in and settles onto his makeshift pallet. He doesn't stay awake much longer, feeling safer sleeping near Daniel even if the man was furious with him. He couldn't blame him for being mad if he hadn't done anything, but Barrett also had to give himself the benefit of the doubt. The 2 other people on the boat had disappeared, and he knew he hadn't done anything. When he closes his eyes, he has high hopes for getting home. He'd conjured up the image of the map of Ch.4, and he had a good idea that they needed to head east to get back, or at least hit land. It was a guess, but there were only 4 directions to pick from, and he thought he was right. His last thoughts of the night were the imagined reunion when they pulled back up on shore. He hoped that Nick and Crystal would be standing there, waiting for them with some sort of explanation, something that made sense and that could piece together the last couple of days. Then he is asleep. His body goes limp just as a faint glow shines from under the door. When he stirs, the cabin door is open and banging loudly against the wall. He stands up and doesn't find Daniel, and trepidatiously he creeps out the door, looking around to try and find his friend. He He doesn't see him at first, but the floating heads are back. The eyes stare up at him, bobbing closer and closer as the memory of them return from the previous nights. "Daniel," Barrett hisses. No answer. "Daniel, come on," he says a bit louder, turning to catch a glimpse of his friend at the back of the boat. Barrett's stomach sinks as he steps towards his friend. He's climbing down off the deck onto the ladder that sinks into the water. "Stop, Danny," Barrett yelps, rushing at his friend. "Don't you feel them, Barrett? They're here," he says robotically, one of his feet already in the black water. His head floats closer and closer. Barrett's entire body rocks as a wave of panic rushes over him. He grabs Daniel's t-shirt, pulling him roughly onto deck. His friend doesn't fight him, but stands up with no hesitation and begins to climb back down the ladder again. "Stop!" Barrett yells, and he balls Daniel's shirts in his hand again, nausea and vertigo sweeping through him, and his consciousness wavers for a moment. He stumbles back, letting go of Daniel, and slams into the side of the cabin. He tries to right himself, to stand back up, but his body does not cooperate. Then it happens. The sound begins. The sound of wet skin slapping against the wooden deck. "No," he moans, clawing at the deck to try and at least sit up. At this point, Daniel is waist deep in the water, and to his best friend's horror, his eyes begin to glow like the others in the water. Daniel smiles an empty, haunting smile, and then he lets go of the ladder, shooting down into the water and disappearing. "Danny," Barrett croaks, just as something heavy slams into the back of his head and he loses consciousness. Okay, what do I like about this chapter? I know on the surface it kind of seems like a repetition of the last chapter. It's just a different character disappearing in the end. But I like that. I think it's kind of robotic. It's kind of meticulous. It's uncontrollable. It's unstoppable. And I think that adds to the terror factor of a story like this. Something else that I really do like about this chapter is the tension between Daniel and Barrett. I like that the two of them are kind of butting heads and angry, and they make their accusations and they make it known what they think. And it's set out pretty clearly for them and for the reader or listener, however you're consuming the content. I like that. I also like that they don't make up. There's not like a friendly, "Oh, I was wrong, you were right" type of thing, and everything is good before Daniel disappears. No, they get in a fight and then Daniel disappears. Something else that I thought was pretty good about this chapter was the end scene. It's scary in the same way that Crystal's disappearance was scary. She's hypnotized, she's controlled, but this time Barrett notices that Daniel's eyes start to glow, just like the other characters. Well, not like the other characters. We don't see that. We don't see that. He kind of gets knocked out before Nick does anything. When Crystal disappears, he's confused and disoriented. But this time he gets a pretty clear notion. His memories and his dreams, or what he thinks are dreams, are getting clearer and clearer as the story progresses. And I really do like that. Some things that I can do better, I can always do better with repeating words. There's only so many words for things like water or a boat or asking or saying. There's only so many words that can mean the same thing. So I do like to cut myself some slack and know that just because I'm hearing myself repeat the same word doesn't mean that a reader would have that same sort of exhaustion. But I would like to get better at it. I mean, I can't really say the word water in a different language and it mean the same thing, but I kind of want to figure out other ways to signify that. So maybe instead of, and I have been doing this more in subsequent chapters, instead of saying water every time, sometimes I'll say ocean or sea, even though that drives my partner crazy because he says it's not an ocean, it's a sea. So I need to be accurate. But I'll say ocean or sea, water. Sometimes I just describe it as the inky darkness or something that's very specific. So that, can you see that on camera? Can you see my cat eating a dry bouquet? Isn't that fun? Gonzo, am I gonna have to come over there? Y'all hold on 1 second. Shoo. Shoo. Well, that's embarrassing. Now you all have seen my outfit, which you weren't supposed to see. I was still wearing work jeans and no shoes. But anyway, something else that I do think I can work on, just in general, is now he's jumping on the... It's so hard having children. If you're just listening to this means nothing to you. You might hear the sounds in the background, but my cat is acting up today. But something else I do kind of want to work on just a little bit is being, when it's two characters that use the same pronouns. I think that's the best way to say that. Two characters that use the same pronouns talking to each other, being as clear as possible about who is speaking. Even if it seems obvious to me, I'd rather make it more obvious so that there's no confusion as to who said what. And that's just something I think I do need to work on a little bit, just a little. Besides that, I think that's pretty much the standouts for this chapter. I like the way that these chapters where someone disappears end. I like the imagery of it, and you should know that come chapter, not this next chapter, but the chapter after that, chapter 6, it's going to be a little wild. It's going to be a little bit kooky crazy. I wrote it all in one day, actually within the span of like 3 hours, and I was really into it, and I'm excited to share it with you. So next chapter, chapter 5 is getting to know our main character a little bit better. We get to know Barrett a little better. We get to watch him interact with himself, which is not something we've seen so far. We get to listen to his kind of internal monologue as he's left by himself to his own devices and has no way out. And I'm excited for that. I think that's good character development. I think it's good to give us a sense of who we're following around a little bit better. And I think that it's good to take a break from the repetitive person disappears, somebody gets mad, person disappears, somebody gets mad, person disappears. Mostly because there's no one left to disappear except who we're following, but still. It's a good break in that sort of excitement, and then kind of a, not a letdown, but it's kind of a decline before we go right back up in chapter 6. So that's really all I have for you today. I think that I'm trying to get these podcast episodes as succinct as possible because I felt like hour-long episodes were maybe too long. You guys can let me know if you feel like, no, they were just fine. No, I'd rather hear you talk more in the beginning or the end, or let me know what you think. You can email me at thefloorrejects@gmail.com. You can tweet me at thefloorrejects. It's just at floorrejects, @FLOORREJECTS. And that's pretty much it. That's where you can reach me. My Etsy store is temporarily closed. I am working on some things behind the scenes that require me to close my Etsy store for a little bit, but you can still find my book on Amazon. You can find it on the Kindle bookstore, anywhere you want to look for it. Right now, I'm not only working on the Isle of Artemisia, but I'm also working on revising Drabble, giving it a title, obviously, because Drabble's not a title, and getting that published as well. So sometime in the future, I'll have another book out, something else you can download, read at your leisure. But besides that, that's really it for this week. I think it was a pretty succinct chapter. I think we got through it pretty quickly, and we're moving the story forward. Even if it's a little repetitive, it's moving the story forward quickly and without wasting too much time getting to know fringe characters. Because right now, Crystal, Nick, Daniel, they're just kind of fringe characters. We're only following Barrett from his point of view, so we only really need to get to know him that well in the beginning. And I think they'll probably stay fringe characters because they're not really that interesting to me. But as always, I've been your friendly neighborhood author, drawer, artist, maybe. Don't paint. your local furniture rearranger, Jonathan. And this has been another episode of the Floor Rejects podcast. So I'm going to go and yell at my cat for an hour. Bye.